that?
I
don't think you would.
Okay, well,
was that part of it?
So I want to repeat that because that was just a very powerful story that you just told. But I'll just finish first. The introduction was just that. So we identified 16 leaders around the country of that our young leaders felt would be important to have share that information. So we've interviewed Chris Hartmeyer, and we've interviewed people like Liz McAllister of Jonah House, because that movement, of course, was the movement to stop nuclear arms. We've interviewed John Fife. We've interviewed Jim Lawson and Phil Lawson and Charlie Sherrod in Georgia with the voter registration and the SNCC, and Ruth Perot. So an incredible variety of people. Arthur Waskow, Leonard Bierman. So just people of different faith traditions, but everyone who had played critical roles in the movements of the last century, and is a person of faith and has struggled with these issues and what faith has to contribute to organizing. So that's what we just want to ask you, is to share what in your own life experience in the movement that you've been a leader in all your life, what faith has meant in that movement for you in all the different ways. Let's come this closer to you. And just at the very end, you should know that the way we've been doing this is we just let you share. I'll ask questions if they come up for me. And at the very last question we always ask is for you to speak directly to the young leaders of the 21st century. What advice would you want to give them? So the very end is always that. But first, we're just asking in terms of your own life experience and your own life story, is what has faith contributed to organizing for you?
Well, it's one of the amazing things. I remember reading Joseph Campbell's book, Myth is Truth, and seeing his video. And one of the things that really struck me when he said that one thinks that one's life, that you are deciding what your life is going to be, but if you look back, your life has sort of been decided for you, And so I think thinking about that in terms of people that want to start the justice walk and get on that path to justice, and knowing how scary that can be, especially when you think of not following the usual path to riches and materialism that we have in our society. Right at that moment in time, I think one's faith gets tested because am I making the right decision? And am I doing the right thing? Am I going the right way? And at that point, we also know that especially for young people who have gone to college and their parents have paid for their college and they expect them to become professionals and earn a lot of money, and they decide to take, no, I'm going to do this other thing instead. I'm going to work with the poor and work with the homeless or the people that need help, and there's no money in it. This is a poor path, and I'm not going to get rich doing this kind of work. Then I think at that moment, then one is really plugging in, literally into what we can do with faith, which is a very I guess it's not quite a philosophy, but maybe it's a belief system that we are so sure that what we're going to be doing is the right thing, that I think is what encompasses a feeling of faith. Because then it's also, with all the anxieties that one might have at that moment, reaching down deep into ourselves and just being true to ourselves and saying, no, I have faith in myself, that I'm making the right decision in the first place, and having that faith and knowing that what I'm going to do is going to have results. Even so often I can't see those results, and often it may seem that what I'm doing is just, treading water, I'm not getting anywhere, because that often happens. I remember when during the grape strike, and we had been on strike then from 1965, we're going into 1970, we've been on strike for almost 5 years, and we think, oh, wait a minute, where's this going? I remember one of our people who started with us, he wouldn't join the strike, he thought he was going to lose, and then afterwards he wouldn't go on the boycott because he thought it was a failed strategy. Even Saul Alinsky, who started the Industrial Heirs Foundation, refused to support the assess it in myself, because he said it would never work. How could we possibly organize farm workers? You know, but so all these people that had so much quote unquote organizing knowledge didn't even think that organizing farm workers was possible. But you know, and even if you don't know how it's going to happen, that is what the faith is, because you have no way in the world to know how is this going to happen. You know, you just start on that path, and then the doors open up. And I remember Fred Ross saying to us, who was of course Caesar Chavez's and my mentor. He's the fellow who developed the house meeting method of organizing and taught Caesar and I how to do that, and many other organizers in the net farm workers. But Fred would always say to us, you know, when you're taking these paths, he said it's like you're going out there blindfolded, and you're going on this swamp, and you're trying to find the stones to step on. And, you know, hoping that you're going to find the right stones to step on as you're going through this swamp, blindfolded, right? I think that's a testing of one's calling or one's faith that one has. And the other thing that Fred always told us, he said, you know, don't worry about making mistakes, because you can always go in a different direction, and you can always learn from your mistakes. And I remember Caesar would drive everybody crazy, because and I remember Chris Harmeyer in particular one time, you know, when we had been saying, no, we're not going to have elections, we've had this boycott, we're going to demand they sign contracts, and then Caesar switched, you know, within 24 hours. We had to switch and call every office, no, we are going to go for elections. This was at the Georgia election. And it was kind of a mind-boggler, you know, but that's what made Caesar, I think, such a great leader, because he was resilient, and he was quick to move, and didn't get stuck into you know, one concept or one position or one strategy. Right. He was very flexible, and that, I think, is what made him also a great leader. Again, it's that faith, because other people are going to say you're wrong. And Caesar would say also, you know, I said, some of the people that support us, he says, they come around every other year to feel to the top of my head to see if I've grown horns since the last time they saw me.
They saw him as a devil.
Well, because they suspected his motives. Even when we did the last, I'll give you two other examples. When Caesar did his organic garden, and you know, he did this garden, and you know, some people thought, well, Caesar's crazy now. I remember some of our so-called leaders, Marshall Gans and Jerry Cohen, saying, well, Caesar's kind of lost his marbles now, because he's over there, you know, saying that he's going out there and going out in that garden when he should be, you know, over here doing some organizing. But what Caesar was doing, and he didn't explain himself, and he didn't say to folks, you've got to come and help me grow this food in an organic way. He would go out there early in the morning, and whoever wanted to join him could. He didn't invite anyone. If people wanted to come, it was he and Helen, his wife, were out there finding that food. And then, of course, what was he doing? But he wanted to prove that you could grow food organically without pesticides.
And did it work? I mean, did people pick up on it and understand it?
And he did all of this because he knew that we were going to be launching a boycott of grapes because of the issue of pesticides. And those same critics, Mr. Marshall Gans and Gilbert Padilla, you know, they did a film with the Farmer Federation saying that Caesar has his whole boycott on grapes because of pesticides was smoke and mirrors, supporting the position of the growers on this. And so having faith also means to be ready to have people that you trust and are close to you that are going to say, hey, something's wrong with you. You kind of lost your marbles because you're doing something that is so strange.
Well, it happened to Jesus too. So.
Absolutely.
That Peter said, you know.
And so I think that's having that faith in yourself is so important. And of course, what helps us keep that faith is, of course, you know, doing the praying, doing the meditation, constantly, even questioning our own selves until we're really sure that, yes, I really do think that this is the right thing to do. And as I said before, even if it turns out to be a wrong tactic or a wrong strategy, well, I learned from it, and there was some reason. I often used to say, when we'd have these really bad setbacks in the union, well, it's because we had to learn something along the way. You know, there's something else that we had to do in that process.
That image of being blindfolded and going through,
right.
to walk by faith and not by sight,
Right.
that you learn in the process.
And of course, also in the process, when we talk about, as you mentioned, having faith in people, you have to have faith in people, because if not, you can't work. And even though sometimes your faith is going to be, disappointed in many respects, because people that you trusted and you had faith in, but again, like you said, this is more the Buddhist path. It says even those that disappoint you and those that try to harm you or harm what you're doing, you learn from them anyway, because they're put there in your path for some reason. So if we understand that, then we don't have that hatred or anger against those individuals.
Share the story, if you would, about when you were doing collections, how you had shared that once about what faith that gave, how that confirmed your faith in other people and God working in other people.
Yes, well, when Caesar and I started the union, one of my jobs was to go and collect people's dues. We charged $3.50 a month, and we had an insurance plan. It was like a death benefit, term life insurance, so if someone died, that family got $1,000. And so it was important that we had to, at the end of every month, we had to send in the insurance premiums for all of our members. And so we had to make sure that people paid those dues. Now, back when we started in 1962, that $3.50 would be worth about $40 a month in today's money. So you're talking here about farm workers that were earning about 70 cents an hour to begin with. And so that $3.50 a month meant that they could buy a bag of potatoes and a dozen eggs and tortillas and a pound of beans for their family. And so here my job was to go visit these farm workers who were living sometimes in garages or in places where they had dirt floors and they had cardboard furniture or crates, orange crates as furniture, and saying, I'm here to get you $3.50 a month, for the union dues. And it was so hard for me to do. And I told Caesar, this is just too hard. And he said, no, he said, if they don't pay that money now, he said their life will never, never change. And then, he knew that they had to be part, they had to support the organization. They had to be the organization. If not, it wasn't going to work, because all other attempts at organizing farm workers had failed. And one of these families, I remember, once we got our contracts, that he walked into the office and he handed his whole paycheck. He said, I want this to go to the union. He said, because if it was not for the union, he said, my family would probably starve. And I just remember how thrilled I was, because, he remembered paying those $3.50 a month, and what this family had to go through. And yet, he said, I want my first check to be as a contribution to the union.
But people are capable of great heroism and great sacrifice and carrying the cross. And we forget that. I remember when you shared that story, thinking about how often in congregations people will say, well, how can you expect workers to take risks and to risk their jobs? And, that's unfair, to expect people who are so poor to do that.
And that's the worst thing that we can do, is when we're trying to help people, the worst thing that we can do is to feel sorry for them. Because when we feel sorry for them, we're really taking away their dignity. And so we need them to participate, to let them know that they are really fighting, for themselves, and that they're fighting for their own respect. It's not, we're helping them in our organizing, helping them understand that they have power. But that power doesn't mean anything unless they take responsibility to use that power. And that the only way that they can use that power is by coming together and by working together and by taking direct, nonviolent action to make changes in their lives. Another story I love to tell is when farm workers went on that great boycott. And so we're sending farm workers all over the United States of America. When they're leaving Delano, they don't know where they're going to go. They have no idea. They're in the car, and when you get to this town, when you get to Phoenix or Salt Lake City or Albuquerque, New Mexico, call and we'll tell you where you're going to be staying. So we've got these farm workers, got all these hundreds of farm workers traveling across country, and they have no idea. Okay, we're going to set you out and go on Highway 40 or
like Jesus sending out the 10
exactly,
or Jesus sending out the 70.
And then while they're on the road, we're busy on the telephones calling different seminaries and convents and friends that we have, we've got this farm worker family, because it's the men and women and the children. We've got them on the road, and they're going to be arriving there sometime tonight. And could you put them up for the night? And could you provide some food for them? I mean, it was really a pilgrimage of people going across country the way that they did, and yet it worked. It just worked. And first of all, people had that faith that they knew that yes, somebody there would be waiting for them. I remember one story that one of the boycotters said we sent a yellow bus with both farm workers to New York City, and they were going to stop in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Well, he didn't get there till about, I guess, 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, people were there waiting for them. They had mariachis for them. They had the food for them. Well, they had a party, and nobody went to bed that night. They just stayed up all night partying, and so the next morning they just went back on their bus and kept on driving to New York. So the people there were just there to receive them. And so all these farm workers going back east, they having no idea that this was even going to work. So you're going to send farm workers from Delano and Early Martin, Fresno, wherever, back east, and then you're going to ask millions of Americans not to buy grapes.
Right.
Not to buy grapes.
I can understand why people thought it wouldn't work.
and then the farm workers who couldn't barely speak the English language, going out there and then picking up volunteers once they got there, organizing people to help them. And I love 2 stories I want to share with you.
Yeah.
One of them, so I'm in charge of the East Coast boycott from New York to Chicago, from Florida to Canada, all the East Coast. And a farm worker calls me and he says, Señora Huerta, ya quitaron la uva, they took the grapes off, the store took the grapes off. I said, wonderful, what's the name of the store? He said, I don't know. I said, well, look at the sign. He said, Señora, I don't know how to read.
Wow.
I said, well, ask somebody or ask the manager what the name of the store is, because I had to record it.
Yeah.
But I thought, oh my God, this is the power of faith.
That's right.
That this farm worker from this little town, who had never been out of his town, all the way 3,000 miles from New York City, standing in front of a store, asking people, don't shop at the store, don't buy the grapes. And it worked. And just the other story I love to tell is this is because we picked up a lot of young volunteers, right? And so we had this one young woman, Wendy Greenfield, young Jewish girl, and she's from, she's out there helping us on the boycott. She was in our first grade boycott. She had been one of our high school boycott committee, and then when we went back to the second boycott in 74, 75, then she actually came on staff. So Wendy is in Lower Manhattan, and she's waiting for the farm workers to come in and speak at this Catholic church. Well, the farm worker didn't show up. So she gave a whole speech about the farm workers and the pesticides and how the teamsters had come in and, and how people had been killed. And she's giving this whole story, and all the priest was just so taken with her and everybody. And then she's coming out of the church. She meets her Jewish aunt who lived next door. And she says, would you please tell this priest that I want those kids in his school to stop making so much noise?
That was very funny.
So Wendy was giving this whole speech as a farm worker, and then she told her, "This is my niece. I want her to tell you." But there's just a million boycott stories, and I just met this woman the other day. I think it was in Denver actually, who told me that she was actually she was in the maternity ward, about ready to have a baby, when she gets a phone call from the boycott organizer asking, have you called your volunteers to come out of the picket line? She said, well, I would like to, but I really can't because I'm about ready to give birth. So I think of all the boycott stories, that's one of the best ones that I've heard.
The levels of dedication that
Right,
people experience.
absolutely.
Were you surprised when you won? Did you experience, and did people...
Not, and we were, because we started the boycott in 19, we had a couple of boycotts in between. It was a big, great boycott. We started in 68, and then we kept coming back to Delano, at board meetings, and I always felt, I don't want to see the farm workers because they're going to say, well, I haven't won yet. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of always bracing myself, and when I would see the workers, and then I would feel really apologetic. And don't worry, we're going to win next year. Don't worry, no, we're fine here. You just keep out there working. We didn't win this year, we'll win next year.
Yeah, that's faith also. That understanding that it may not come quickly, but it will come.
And it takes a long time, and even in that Caesar's great words that he had at the end, we did this movie about the boycott and everything, and he said, in the end we will win. in the end we will win. And then the other thing he also, Caesar always said, which I love to quote, especially when we do rallies for people who are on strike or fighting for, union contracts or fighting for a cause. And Caesar said, the only time you lose is when you quit. The only time you lose is when you quit. And so, our strike and our boycott took 5 years from the time we went on strike. Well, we started the union in 1962. We went on strike in 1965, and we won the big great boycott in 1970. So, that was from the day we started till the time we went on contracts. Yeah, it was six years or something like that?
Yeah.
No, more than that, 8 years, I guess.
And then there were hard times after where you lost the contracts and got them back, right?
Right. And then now we might say that they're lost again because after that, after the Teamsters, we had that big second great boycott, and then of course we had all the union elections, and then throughout all those elections, we won all the elections. But then when we got Duke Machen and Pete Wilson in as governors, and literally so much of what we won was lost, and the farm workers today are still trying to get all those contracts back. But in the meantime, we've expanded into Washington State, into Florida, and
so there's certainly been some growth.
There's been some growth,
and there have been other, the Makali workers were another example of farm workers that were inspired by your example.
Right.
Generations later.
Actually, the Makali workers had gone on strike way back in 1970. In
Really?
fact, I was there with them when we negotiated a wage increase for them. So their struggle goes back. It's been on for many years. Yeah.
Part of what I think that the young leaders we've been working with are fascinated by are some of the, not only the faith motivation, but some of the faith strategies that you all used, the pilgrimage and the fast. And these were strategies that, of course, some of them were strategies Gandhi used, but really strategies translated into a Catholic context. The procession and the pilgrimage to Sacramento, and then Caesar's fasting. And I wanted you to share more about that why did he fast, and why did it work, and how did it work, and to share more of the story of that, and also about the pilgrimage that you took.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Christ also fasted, right? Yeah. So it is a Christian thing, so to speak. Sessa was a great devotee of Gandhi, and it was interesting when I first met Sessa. I had no idea that he had read so much of Gandhi as I had also, when I was young. So we were very much in tune in terms of, and not only the fasting, what I'd like to talk about, but also the poverty. Yes. Because again, when people get into the path of justice, it's not going to be a very rewarding, when it comes to money and material things. And Sessa was very strong about that. He really never wanted any of us to earn more than the farm workers did. And so this is why we lived off of donations and the right stipends. And it worked because it really created a movement. And it's really interesting if you compare that, say, with people who get paid. It's such a difference in terms of the spirit. And I don't know whether that poverty, choice of poverty, makes a difference in the way that people look at the work that they do. And Caesar, he really encouraged everyone to fast. It was not just he that fasted, but like when our martyrs were killed, when Naji Daifada was killed, when Juan de la Cruz was killed, when also Nan Friedman was killed, he wanted everyone to fast, and he asked everybody to fast. And so people fasted for 3 days, even and kept on doing their work, whatever they were doing. But he encouraged everyone to fast. And he did a lot of fasting. He would just fast sometimes for 7 days or 15 days, and he didn't make a big announcement or pronouncement. We just kind of noticed he was fasting because he would be eating. And he would do this often before some big contract negotiation was going to come up or some big political thing was going to happen. Now, when he did his long fasts, which were, of course, so incredible, what he did, it was a total spiritual offering that he did. But the interesting thing about Caesar, because he was so pragmatic, and he was an organizer at heart, is he wanted to make sure that these fasts were also being used to organize. And I think a lot of times people have a little misinterpretation of that. And when they want to do a fast for a cause, they think that they can just kind of lock themselves up somewhere and this is going to happen. But no, and of course Gandhi did the same thing, because when Gandhi fasted, he made sure that the whole country knew that he was fasting. And so when Caesar fasted, we had to organize this out. Now, he wouldn't tell us ahead of time. He would never let us know he was fasting until he was in about the 7th or the 8th day of the fast. And sometimes we kind of notice the signs, like when we eat a lot of bread and stuff and put a little bit away, we'd say, oh, it looks like Caesar might be getting ready for a fast. And then he would just announce it, okay, I'm fasting. This is my 8th or 9th day that I'm fasting. And he wouldn't announce it until he was like over a week into the fast.
Wow.
And then we would start making the preparations. And then part of the preparations was the organizing, letting people know this is a fast and what the fast is for. We're prisoners for nonviolence, the one in 1968 in Delano. And when Robert Kennedy came to break the fast with him, the second one was in 1972, which he did in Arizona, when they passed this law that would make it illegal for farmers to strike or to boycott. You could go to prison for going on strike. And that one he did to take the hatred out of the hearts of the growers, he said. And that Joseph Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's oldest son, came then to break that fast with him. And then the third one, of course, he did for the pesticides, to bring to the attention of the American public about the poisons on our food. And Caesar really believed very strongly in the spiritual power of the fast. And he never wanted to call it a hunger strike. He never called it, because he never wanted to be coercive. For him, it was more of an offering. It was more of a petition. He didn't want it to look like he was, blackmailing or coercing people to come to his way of thinking.
I mean, that is part of what I think is at the heart of a faith-rooted model, is the understanding of the capacity of all people to change,
Right.
of the capacity to reach people's hearts, and the conversion of the heart is always possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you say that he didn't want to coerce, that he wanted to reach people's hearts so that they would respond.
And Caesar meditated also daily. He meditated every single day. That was part of his routine. He would wake up very early and he would meditate before he would go to the office. He believed a lot in meditation. He practiced yoga very diligently. And the other thing about Caesar, he never really pressured anyone to his way of life. Like, he was a vegetarian, and he didn't say, I want people to be vegetarians, but he brought cooks up to cook for the community, to teach them how to cook in a vegetarian way, to explain the benefits of macrobiotic food and eating, and so he tried to lead more by example than by coercion or pressuring people. So that's what I think made him a great leader.
Did the fast change people's hearts? Did it reach people's hearts? Any of those long fasts?
I believe it did, and maybe I think the one thing it did, it inspired people to get involved. In fact, I don't know if you know this or not, but Si Se Puede came out of one of Caesar's fasts.
No, I didn't tell us.
Actually, we were in Arizona in 1972, and I had gone to speak to some of these Latino leaders about coming to join us, because Caesar did this fast every day, and we had a mass and a rally. And they said, oh, Dolores, in California you can do all that stuff, but not in Arizona. In Arizona, no se puede. No, you can't.
Right.
And then I said to them, just spontaneously, no, yes you can. Si se puede in Arizona.